talks about gun control usually have nothing to do with the folks that are in the news at the time. You know, they'll have a serial killer, a racist person, or some other crazy person shoots people. But the laws that there are get applied to black folks, people of color. It's not something that, you know, Jim Bob has to worry about. The first gun control laws were in the 20s when there was supposedly this black crime wave. They went door to door, kicked down black folks' doors, and took their guns. It's the system that causes the violence. Capitalism must have unemployment. When the unemployment numbers start going low, you'll see articles in the Wall Street Journal and other financial institutions where they're worried. Unemployed people need to eat too. So they're going to get involved in illegal business for the most part if there's no safety net. If they're unemployed, there's no safety net. Illegal business is the other job opportunity. Illegal business, like legal business, uses violence to regulate itself. All legal business uses violence to regulate itself, so does illegal business. If you have a supermarket and somebody comes in and just steals a cart full of groceries, they're physically dealt with. Either somebody from the store is gonna do it or the police are gonna do it. Now, those police may do anything from just taking the cart back, which is usually not gonna happen, or they're gonna bring the person to jail, or they're going to beat them down, kill them, whatever. The police are the physical force, they're the violence that's used to regulate legal business. In the 1920s, when alcohol was illegal, you rob the liquor dude, gangsters come after you. Now, you rob the liquor dude, police come after you. Business, legal and illegal, uses force to regulate itself. All the regulations that they have for legal businesses are enforced by law too. You know, like if McDonald's says you can't open up your own McDonald's and not give with their logo, and you can't open up McDowell's and stuff like that. In the end, if you don't adhere to what the court says, you know that the police will come take the shit down. But illegal business cannot go to court and say, you know, Your Honor, I was supposed to buy a whole key of cocaine, and this is clearly 85% baking soda. I demand restitution. You can't go to the zoning commission and say, you know, we've been having a problem. There's too many people selling dope on this corner right here. I'd like to amend the zoning laws to only allow for 3 people on this block. You can't do that. Violence is there regulating illegal business. And so that's what most of the violence is from. The other part of it comes from a culture that comes from having to have the ability to regulate your own business through violence. And like I was saying before, fishing villages create fishing songs. You know, if you want people to not be shooting each other, if you want fishermen to all of a sudden start growing wheat, you're not gonna be able to do that through just a song. You know, you could send them growing wheat songs all the time. They might even start singing some of them, but they're still gonna be fishing. There's a material basis for violence. If we want to stop violence in the immediate time, we cannot just say everybody needs to learn to be, you know, more gentle with each other. Everybody needs to. Okay, one of the last big killings I remember in my neighborhood was this dude who was teaching the kids Swahili and, you know, doing all this stuff. And he would always be complaining, oh, these knuckleheads, they doing this and they doing that. Came to a confrontation where his son got into something with somebody else. They had spent some money. It was something on dope or whatever. And he knew that this dude was coming after his son. And he rode in the car with his son. This is just him admitting it in the newspaper. He rode in the car with his son with, you know, some high-powered artillery and shot this dude down. This is the same dude that was but the point is that most people that kill other people, they don't want to. It's not like like a week ago they were like, man, I'm killing motherfuckers. That's how they have it on the movies and maybe on some songs or something like that. But people don't want to. They do it because they're scared. And they do it because there's these situations that come up that are based around how business is formulated. Tukey Williams, who was murdered on death row, one of his things that he did while he was in prison was he came up with like a different way to regulate the dope game, like the own court system and stuff like that, and saying that and his point was that would, and this is somebody that was one of the leaders of the Clipse, and saying like the Clipse wasn't just about people like, I'm shooting this and shooting that. He talked about how it all went down to turf war over business. If we want to stop gun violence in black communities, we're gonna have to have jobs that pay enough. You know, like most people that are selling dope, they're not really making more than $12 an hour nowadays. It's just not happening. You know, my father was a public defender for so many years, and people couldn't afford a lawyer. He'd be like, what's going on? You know, they're selling all this dope, and then they don't have enough money to buy, to pay for a public, to pay for a private investigator to go interview witnesses to say that they weren't here or there. The idea that the violence is stemming from certain social skills that we don't have goes back to the racist ideas of what's being put on about people of color. Like, our culture is inadequate. But the truth is that you take the richest family from Beverly Hills who don't have to engage in one-on-one violence at all, and you put them in a situation where they have to do something illegal and to make money, and then where that money or their livelihood is threatened, and then they have to get involved in situations of regulating that themselves without calling the police. It's gonna be violent. It's gonna be shit going down. If we want peace in the streets, as they say, we're gonna have to do that with a radical, militant, mass labor movement. We're gonna have to take these jobs that exist in the black community already, or in communities of color that are paying minimum wage, and make them pay $20 an hour, because they're making enough to do that. The only way we're gonna do that is through an illegal labor movement, because it's illegal to do solidarity strikes, and that's been the case since the 40s, and it's the Taft-Hartley law. And that's why unions are weak, because if you were going to organize McDonald's, you would have to organize all the McDonald's in a certain part of Chicago at least, and they would have to strike together, and you would all have to do it in a militant way that kept out scabs. That would then stop the gun violence that's going on. It wouldn't stop the racist gun violence that's happening, but it would stop the gun violence that's happening in our communities. That being said, all of that stuff is really played up. The CDC put out a thing earlier this year that showed that in 1950, there was a third more black-on-black violent crime than there is today. And that's supposed to be the time when everybody was peaceful. They always, in the days of Martin Luther King, they did this, and now we kill each other. No, we kill each other less, and we have less money. So in all, we're less violent. And it's actually 78% lower than it was in 1970. Even the discussion coming up is somewhat okays police violence, because you put out this thing like black folks are violent, and then a cop kills somebody, and they're like, oh, people are like, well, of course they, should have done that, because, they're gonna be scared. Well, if they are scared of black folks, it's of their own doing. It's not because of reality. I've been an organizer since the 80s. And before Rodney King, it was really hard to get people out for anti-police brutality. There were no video. So a lot of time, I go to my friends, even folks that I knew that were, selling dope or selling weed, and be like, hey man, we got this rally. This dude, got beat up by the police. He must have been, he must have swung on him. He must have been swinging on, blah, blah, blah. it was hard to get people out there. Like, so Rodney King didn't just, that video didn't just prove it to the white community, it proved it to black folks too, who, even though they may have seen other things, weren't willing to admit what kind of a world they lived in. That's also what's going on with the conversation about black folks killing each other. I know right here in Chicago, so what they do in Oakland, if the murder rate goes up 1 year, they'll talk about that. But if it doesn't, they won't talk about that. And so we get this idea that it's constantly growing. It's constantly growing. And what's really happening is they're constantly talking about it more and not handling the real issues that cause that. What's more, if you look at those CDC statistics, people of color has bought in even more to this idea that we're fucking up shit for ourselves. Right now, you'll see all sorts of things like, for girls, like, don't give your precious jewel away. Like that's their precious jewel is their vagina. That's the only thing that's precious about them or whatever. The truth is that teen pregnancy is way down from what it was in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But we keep talking about that as like as the problem. And I'm not talking about it's because abortion is up. I'm talking about them getting pregnant in the first place. And even before that, I'm sure, I haven't seen the statistics, but you know, when my father was born, my grandmother was in her teens when she got married. They just forced you to get married. Teens were still having sex and getting pregnant. They just forced you to get married. We have this view about ourselves that leads into discussions that make it okay, you know, that make it okay to fund the police more. Getting back to the original thing, this whole question of guns and whether guns should be allowed is really part of the discussion that's saying we need more police in communities of color. And that's really what's being said.
Because of a lack of history, understanding of history, they find themselves repeating steps that have already been taken when all they have to do was pivot from what Dr. King already did.
Any obstacle or any form of adversity is gonna make you a better person when you come out of it on the other side. You're not gonna wanna hear that at the front of it.
Everybody should always aspire to be the person that they're not and do what it takes to become that person.
There's madness and miseducation. When you're telling somebody half of the story and you're lying to black kids about who they are, you're not telling them, you know, that they come from kings and queens.